My daughter-in-law set a plate of cookies on the counter and didn't look at me when she said it. "We were actually thinking," she started, and I knew from the way she said actually that this had been discussed before I walked into the room, that the trip might be a lot for you. All that walking, the heat. My son was standing by the window. He didn't turn around. "It's Portugal, Mom," he said. "Lisbon has all those hills. You remember how your knee was last summer?" I did remember. I also remembered that I had never once complained about my knee to either of them. I had mentioned it once to my sister on the phone, and my son must have overheard, or she must have said something, and now my knee had become the reason. "You'd have the whole house to yourself," my daughter-in-law said. She was smiling now, the kind of smile that wants you to feel like you're getting a gift. "The garden is really coming in nicely. And the cat. The cat." She said it like the cat was a selling point. I said, "Of course. Whatever works best for everyone." That night I sat at the kitchen table after they'd gone to bed. The house was quiet in the particular way that houses get quiet when you're the only one in them who isn't sleeping peacefully. I made myself a cup of tea. I didn't drink. I looked at the garden through the window. It was coming in nicely. She was right about that. I am 67 years old. I have 2 replaced hips, not a replaced knee. My knee is fine, and I have walked the length of the Appalachian Trail in sections over 11 years. Not all at once, not when I was young. In sections, starting at 52, after my husband passed, because I needed somewhere to put my feet that wasn't the bedroom we'd shared for 31 years. I thought about that. I thought about the cookies she'd put on the counter and how she hadn't offered me one. I thought about how my son had stayed at the window. Then I got up and I opened my laptop. The last time I'd traveled alone was 2009. A long weekend in Savannah to visit a college friend. I'd driven myself to the airport, checked one bag, found my gate. It had all felt perfectly ordinary because it was. Before my husband got sick, we traveled constantly. Not extravagantly, we weren't those people. But we took our weeks. The Outer Banks every August, New Orleans twice, once, a long weekend in Montreal where it rained the entire time, and we ate so much smoked meat we were embarrassed to tell anyone. After he died, I stopped. Not intentionally. There was just always something. His estate. My daughter moving to Seattle, my son's wedding, the grandchildren. Then the grandchildren were older and didn't need me the way they used to, and my son and his wife had built their life into a shape that had a place for me in it. A specific, bounded place, and I had settled into that place without noticing it happening. That's the thing no one tells you about getting older in someone else's house. It doesn't happen all at once. There's no moment where someone says, "From now on, you are furniture." It accumulates. A holiday dinner where your opinion about the stuffing is overruled. A Sunday where they all go to a movie and assume you'd rather rest. A phone call you overhear, "Mom's fine, she doesn't really go out much anymore." And you think, "Don't I? Don't I go out?" You stop checking. That's the real problem. You stop asking yourself what you want because it starts to feel like a question that doesn't apply to you anymore. I had stopped asking. I found a flight to Porto on a Tuesday. I didn't plan to go to Portugal just because they were going to Portugal. I want to be clear about that. I went to Portugal because when I typed "flights leaving next week" into the search bar, the first result was Porto. And I had always wanted to see the azulejos, the blue and white tiles that cover every surface in that city. And my husband and I had talked about it once in 2006 over a bottle of wine, and it had stayed in me the way certain conversations do. The flight was $740 round trip. I put in my credit card number before I could think about it too hard. Then I sat back and felt something I hadn't felt in a very long time. Not excitement exactly, something more like recognition. Like meeting someone you went to school with 30 years ago and realizing you'd forgotten they existed, and then feeling the particular loss of all those years of forgetting. I booked a small hotel in the Barro Alto neighborhood. I read that it was hilly, steep in fact, and I specifically chose it for that reason. My knee is fine, I didn't tell my son. I want you to understand that I'm not proud of this, exactly. I'm also not ashamed of it. I told myself I would tell him before I left. I told myself that every day for the 8 days between booking the flight and getting in the cab to the airport. I packed my suitcase and I rolled it to the front door and I left a note on the refrigerator. Gone for a little while. Will text when I land. The cat has food until Thursday. Mom, that was all I wrote. On the cab ride, my phone buzzed twice. I turned it face down on my knee. My knee that is perfectly fine. I want to tell you about arriving in Porto, because I need you to understand what it felt like. The flight landed just after 7 in the morning, local time. I barely slept. I never sleep on planes. And I was wearing the same clothes I'd left in, and my hair was doing what my hair does after 9 hours in recycled air. And I came out of the terminal into the cool of early morning, and I stood there for a moment in the taxi queue and thought, no one on this entire continent knows where I am. Not as a frightening thought, as a free one. I found my hotel. The woman at the desk had a gray streak in her dark hair and the efficient kindness of someone who has checked in 10,000 tired travelers and decided to be gentle with all of them. She said my room wasn't ready yet, which I'd expected, and she put my bag behind the desk and drew me a small map of a bakery 2 blocks away where I could get a pastel de nata and a coffee. I sat in that bakery for an hour. The custard tart was warm and the coffee was strong, and a small dog sat under the table across from me and looked at me steadily, with the patience of an animal that has nowhere to be. I looked back. Outside the window, the city was waking up. A man was hosing down the sidewalk. A woman in a yellow coat walked by very fast, talking on her phone. 2 boys in school uniforms were arguing about something that seemed extremely important to them. I thought, I am here. I actually came. My phone had 17 messages by the time I looked at it. My son's first message said, "Mom, where are you? We saw the note." The second said, "I'm calling you." There were 4 missed calls. Then my daughter-in-law, "This isn't funny. Please call us." Then my son again, later, "Mom, I'm worried. Please just tell me you're okay." And then, much later, my daughter in Seattle, which meant he had called her, "Mom, David said you left? Are you okay? Call me." I texted my son. I said, "I'm in Portugal. I'm fine. I'll call you tomorrow." He called immediately. I let it ring. Then I sent one more message. "I promise I'm safe. I just need a few days. I love you." I put the phone in my bag and went to find the azulejos. The tiles are everywhere. That's the thing about Porto. You think you understand it from photographs, and then you turn a corner and an entire building is covered floor to roofline in blue and white patterns, geometric and floral and narrative, scenes from history, scenes from mythology, and you stop in the middle of the sidewalk, and you stand there for longer than is probably reasonable with your head tipped back, and a group of tourists walks around you like you're a lamppost, and you don't care. I spent the first full day just walking, slowly at first, because the streets in the Barrio Alto are exactly as steep as advertised, and then faster as my body remembered that it knows how to do this. My hips have been replaced, but they work. My knee has never been the issue. I walked through the Ribera district, along the Douro River, and I watched the Rebelo boats sitting fat and still in the water. And I crossed the Dom Luis Bridge on the upper deck, because a woman at the bakery had told me to. And from up there the city spread out on both banks of the river, and the light came off the water, and I thought, without planning to think it, I have been so small. Not small in a self-pitying way. Small in a self-pitying way. Small in a factual way. I had made myself small. My life had gotten very narrow, and I had told myself the narrowness was appropriate, that I was past the age of taking up space, that wanting things for myself was a kind of selfishness. I had been wrong about that. I called my daughter on the 3rd day. She is 53 hours ahead in Seattle, and we talked at 10 her time, which was the evening for me, and I was sitting on the small terrace outside my room with a glass of the local wine and the sounds of the city coming up from below. She said, "David is really upset." I said, I know. You could have told him? Yes. She was quiet for a moment. My daughter is not like my son. She has always given me a little more room to be a person. I don't know if that's because she's a daughter, or because she lives farther away, or because of who she is. Maybe all three. Are you okay? She asked. I'm better than okay, I said. I'm sitting on a terrace in Portugal drinking wine. She laughed. It surprised both of us a little. What made you do it? She asked. I thought about how to answer that. I thought about the cookies on the counter, and the cat offered as compensation, and my son at the window who wouldn't turn around. I remembered, I said, that I'm still here. She didn't say anything for a moment. Then she said, Good. On the fourth day, I took a train to Sintra. I know. I had said I was going to Porto, and Porto is not Sintra, but Sintra is only 40 minutes from Lisbon, and I had looked it up the night before. The palaces on the hilltops, the gardens, the place that looks like it was built inside a fairy tale. And I thought, why not? I am a woman alone in Portugal, with a train pass and comfortable shoes and no particular schedule. Why not Sintra? The palace at the top of the hill is called Peña Palace, and it is the most spectacularly impractical building I have ever seen in my life. It is painted in orange and yellow and maroon, with turrets and archways and a kind of gleeful excess that seems to say, we built this because we wanted to and because we could, and because beauty doesn't need to justify itself. I stood in front of it for a long time. There was a woman near me, about my age, maybe a few years older, sitting on a low wall with a sketch pad open on her knee. She was drawing the palace in pencil with the concentration of someone who draws not to make art, but to see. Because drawing makes you look harder than looking does. I watched her for a moment and then I said, I'm sorry to bother you. Is that difficult to draw? She looked up. She had short white hair and glasses pushed up on her forehead, and the easy expression of someone who has been retired long enough to stop feeling guilty about sitting on walls in the middle of the day. Everything worth drawing is difficult, she said. Sit down if you like. Her name was Frances. She was from Edinburgh, visiting a friend in Lisbon, had taken a day trip out alone because her friend had a dentist appointment that had turned into something longer. We sat on that wall for almost an hour. She showed me her sketch pad, page after page of places she'd been, loose and gestural, not precise but alive. A market in Marrakech. A harbor in Croatia. A harbor in Croatia. A corner of some city I didn't recognize with a fire escape and a laundry line. Do you travel alone a lot? I asked. Always, she said. My husband died in 2015. For about 2 years I didn't go anywhere. Then I thought, well, these places aren't going to look at themselves. I laughed, and it felt like something unclenching in my chest. What about family? I said. Don't they worry? She looked at me over her glasses. My children worry about everything, she said. That's what children do. I've decided to let them. I talked to my son on the 5th day. I had been avoiding it. Not because I was afraid of him, exactly, but because I knew what the conversation would be, and I wasn't ready to have it until I had walked enough and eaten enough good food and sat with myself enough to remember who I was having the conversation as. He answered on the first ring. Mom. Just that. The way he used to say it when he was 16 and had done something wrong and was bracing for consequences. Except this time, the consequences were supposed to be mine. Hi, sweetheart, I said. Are you okay? Are you actually okay? I am actually okay, I said. I'm wonderful, in fact. I'm in Sintra. There's a palace here that looks like a birthday cake. Silence. Mom, you can't just... You left a note. On the refrigerator. I know. That's not... You're 67. And there it was. I'd been waiting for it, and there it was. Yes, I said. I am. Your point? It's not safe. You don't know anyone there. What if something happened? Something could happen to me in your kitchen, I said. It could happen to me in the garden, tending the cat, watching the house. Age doesn't make anywhere safe, sweetheart. It just makes people more comfortable keeping me somewhere they can see me. He didn't answer right away. That's not what we were doing, he said finally. I know you don't think it was, I said. And I meant that. I wasn't angry anymore. I had spent my anger on the long hills of the Barro Alto, had walked it out of myself somewhere between the train station and the Douro. What I felt was something steadier. I don't think you meant it the way it landed. But it did land, David, and I needed to go. He was quiet for a long time, long enough that I looked at my phone to see if the call had dropped. I'm sorry, he said. I didn't. He stopped. I didn't think about how it sounded. I know, I said. That's also part of it. Frances and I had dinner that evening at a restaurant in Sintra that her friend had recommended, a small place with wooden tables and candles and bottles and a menu that had been the same for 25 years, which is either a sign of stagnation or confidence. And I have decided it is confidence. We split a bottle of Vinho Verde, and she told me about her life in Edinburgh. Her 2 grown children, her granddaughter who was 5 and had recently decided her name was actually Moonstone. Her tiny flat in the new town with a view of the castle if you leaned out the kitchen window at the right angle. I told her about the trip, the note on the refrigerator, the 17 messages. She nodded throughout without the expression of someone calculating judgment. Good, she said when I finished. Good for you. My daughter-in-law was annoyed, I said. She'll get over it, Frances said. Or she won't, but you'll have been to Portugal either way. I wrote her email address in the back of my passport because I don't trust myself to put things in my phone correctly after the second glass of wine. She wrote mine in her sketch pad in the margin next to a drawing of the harbor at Cascais. We have since exchanged 6 emails. She is planning a trip to Lisbon again in the spring and has asked if I want to meet her there. I have told her I'll think about it. I am definitely going. I flew home on a Sunday. My son picked me up at the airport. He was waiting at arrivals with his hands in his pockets, and the expression he's had since he was small when he's nervous and doesn't want to show it. He's 53 years old, and he still makes that face. I love him so entirely that it sometimes surprises me, the way large things surprise you even when you know they're there. He hugged me for a long time. We didn't say much on the drive home. He asked if I'd eaten on the plane. I said not really. He said my daughter-in-law had made soup. I said that was very kind of her. At a red light, he said, I've been thinking about what you said, about not noticing. I know you have, I said. I want to do better, he said. I don't want you to feel like you're just here to... He stopped. I don't have the right words for it. You don't need the right words, I said. You just need to turn around from the window. He looked at me. I'll tell you another time, I said. There are things I know now that I didn't know before I went. I know that I am not a person who needs to be protected from hills. I know that I can navigate a foreign train system with a data plan and mild determination. I know that there are women my age sitting on walls in front of palaces, drawing the world because they have decided the world is worth drawing. I know that love doesn't always look like being invited. Sometimes it looks like you having to remind people that you exist, not loudly, not with an argument, but with the simple and irrefutable fact of your own life, going forward without permission. My daughter-in-law put a pot of soup on the stove, and she hugged me when I came in, and she said, I'm glad you're back. And I'm glad you went. I don't know what my son said to her while I was gone. I didn't ask. The cat ignored me for most of the evening, the way cats do when they're punishing you for leaving, and then climbed onto my lap at 9 o'clock and stayed there. I have 17 photographs on my phone of tiles. I have a sketch Frances made of the view from our restaurant table. Just the edge of the rooftops and the dark hills beyond, that she slipped into my bag before we parted. I have her email address in the back of my passport. I walk in the mornings now. Not just around the block. Out, properly out, past the houses that end and into the open stretch along the creek where the trail gets uneven and you have to watch where you put your feet. My knee is fine. My knee has always been fine. Some mornings my son joins me. He brings 2 coffees and a thermos, and he doesn't talk much, which is how I know he is listening. We walk for an hour, and then we come back, and the day begins. Last week he said, out of nowhere, "Where do you want to go next?" I looked at him. He was looking straight ahead at the trail. "Lisbon," I said, "in the spring." He nodded slowly, like he was working something out. "Maybe we could all go," he said. I thought about Frances, leaning over her sketch pad on a low wall in the sun. I thought about the palace on the hill like a birthday cake, and the river in the early morning, and the small dog in the bakery who had looked at me with all the patience in the world. "Maybe," I said, "but I'm going either way." He smiled. He didn't look over, but I saw it. "I know," he said. "I know you are. I've been thinking about cause and effect a lot since I got back. Not in an abstract way, in a very specific, kitchen table way. I think about what happens when you spend years making yourself easy to overlook, and I think about what that teaches the people around you. It teaches them that it's fine. That's the honest answer. When you never push back, when you always say, of course, whatever works best, when you accept the cat as compensation for being left behind, you are teaching the people you love that this is how things are. You are training them, without meaning to, without either of you noticing. They learn that you don't need to be asked. You learn that you don't deserve to be. That's the cause. The effect is a Tuesday night, sitting alone at a kitchen table with a cup of tea you don't drink, looking at a garden through a window. I don't say this to assign blame. David is not a bad son. He is a son who learned what I taught him, and what I taught him, without ever saying a word, was that his mother had retired from wanting things, that she had closed that account, that the appropriate role for a woman my age was to be useful and present and quietly content, a kind of benevolent fixture in someone else's life. I had believed that myself, I think. Not consciously. But somewhere in the accumulation of small surrenders, I had accepted it. And there's a particular kind of courage required to unaccept something you've been accepting for years. Not the loud kind, not the kind that announces itself, but the quiet kind that just gets up one morning and books a flight. What I know is this. The moment I stopped waiting to be included, something shifted. Not in them, not immediately, but in me. I remembered that I had a self that existed independently of whether anyone had invited it somewhere. That self had walked 11 years of trail. That self had loved a man for 31 years and survived losing him. That self had raised 2 children and outlasted the years when they needed her and kept on going anyway. Wisdom, I think, is just the accumulated understanding of what you actually are, as opposed to what you've been told you are or what you've told yourself. I had been unwise. I had confused smallness with grace. And the intelligence of going, the real intelligence, wasn't in the defiance of it. It was in the honesty. I finally asked myself what I wanted. That sounds so simple. It isn't. Asking yourself what you want after years of not asking is like using a muscle you forgot you had. It's uncomfortable. It takes longer than it should. But Frances was sitting on that wall. Frances, who lost her husband in 2015 and grieved for 2 years and then decided the world wasn't going to look at itself. She had been asking herself what she wanted for a decade. You could see it in her, not in an aggressive way, but in the simple, settled way of a person who has made peace with the fact that her own life is worth living on purpose. I want to be that. I am working on being that. Some mornings, walking the trail with David, coffee in a thermos, the light coming through the trees, I think I already am. The cause was a Tuesday night and a cup of tea I didn't drink. The effect is Lisbon in the spring, with a friend I met on a wall in front of a palace that looked like a birthday cake. I'll take that, and I'll keep going.